Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 1 to 4 player game Honey Buzz, designed by Paul Salomon and published by Elf Creek Games, who helped sponsor this video. Bees have exciting lives, don't they? Always buzzing around, very busy in their hives of constant activity, and no bee is more busy than the accountant bees. I'll bet you've never heard of accountant bees, but now you're one, and the queen wants you to open a thriving honey market in order to keep the bears and other woodland creatures away. So join me at the table, and let's learn how to play. To set up, place this hive and woodland board in the center of the play area. Put this board on the side labeled A here, which represents a standard game. Then set the hive board on the side for your number of players. 3 to 4 is this side, or 1 to 2 players on this side here. We'll be setting up a 2-player game in this video. These are the double-sided hive tiles, and the symbol on one side is also on the other. They'll come in 6 different types based on the symbols that you'll see on them, and you'll sort them by type into stacks, and then place each one onto the space for it on the hive board. Just match the symbol with what the bees are doing in that area. For example, here we have a scroll, and you'll see some scrolls in this space. When you're done, it will look like this. These are the coin, pollen, and honey resources, which you'll put in a supply by the board. And note that pollen doesn't need to be sorted by color. I'm organizing these using some game trays that I have, and if you want to get some of your own, check the link in the description of this video. The cards with this back are the Queen's Contests, which you'll sort into 3 shuffled groups based on the colors showing on their fronts, and then you pick 1 card at random from each of these groups to set face up in any order on the spaces for them here. Now, if this is your first game, instead just find the one from each color that shows a star here under the symbol in its top left-hand corner. They recommend you use these for your first play. Contests with this flag symbol are known as speed contests, and if you have 4 players, add the matching coins shown here on each of these places. In a 3-player game, just set out the coins for first and second place only, and in a 2-player game, as we have here, just add the first place prize. Now find the cards labeled as small and large orders on their backs and shuffle them separately as I've done here. Then, based on the number of players from this chart found in the rulebook, add a number of large cards to each of these spaces of the woodland board. So in our 2-player game, we add 2 large orders to each, and then it says to deal 1 small order on top of every stack. Once you're finished, you then flip over the top card of each stack. So it will look something like this when you're done. And then you can return all remaining small and large orders back to the box. Over here we have what is known as the market, and at the top of each column you'll place a matching colored piece. Now there are different colors of pollen, but unlike honey, the colors don't matter, so put any piece here. Also, if you have a 2-player game, each piece starts 1 space lower. Every player now takes a player aid and a set of pieces in their chosen color, which includes a board, 10 worker bees, known as beeples, a forage and fan token, and 4 starting hive tiles, which will show your color on their back. The person who woke up earliest is then given this first player marker, or you can just choose randomly. Everyone then puts all of their worker bees into a shared supply within reach, and then takes back a number of them equal to the number showing on screen based on your number of players. So here in this 2-player game, everyone would take back one of their workers and place that onto their board. The table also says to collect a certain amount of coins from the supply, a value of 5 coins for the first player and 10 coins for the second. These are the configuration cards. Green ones are for a standard game, and yellow is for a more challenging experience. You now take one at random from the challenge level that you want. The starting player then arranges their 4 starting hive tiles in any way they like, so long as it matches the overall layout that's shown on the configuration card. Then all the other players arrange their hive pieces to match that player's pieces exactly, and then you can return all of these cards back to the box. Now for your first game, they instead recommend using this configuration that has a star, which shows exactly how to arrange your hive pieces. These are the Nectar tiles, and you'll sort them by their fronts into 4 groups, and then based on this chart showing on screen, you'll remove a certain number of them from each group. So in our case, with 2 players, we remove 2 each. The rest you'll shuffle together and then randomly place into this area of the board, filling in each column from left to right until you've filled up to the column labeled for your number of players. This means it will look something like this when you're done. Each player then puts their forage token on any one of these bees here, either randomly or in reverse turn order. And that's the setup. In Honeybuzz, players will be expanding their hive and gathering nectar to place in it so they can produce honey and sell it to the market. Fulfilling orders, completing contests, gaining money, and honey will all earn you points, and if you have the most by the end of the game, you'll win. The game is played over a series of turns, starting with the first player and then going clockwise around and around the table. And on your turn, you'll either take a tile or recall workers. Then the next player goes. So let's start by seeing how taking a tile works. First, you assign workers from your player board to the hive box of your choice. And if the box you're going to is empty, then you can only assign 1 worker. At the beginning of the game, you'll only have 1 worker anyway, but we'll see later how you can gain some more. If later in the game a box you choose to go to already has bees, either yours or another player's, you can still go there, but you must assign exactly 1 more bee than the last player to go there, and you place these in a stack known as a bee line. So if I or another player wanted to go to this box again later, they'd now have to stack 3 bees into a bee line. Either way, after adding your bee line to the hive, you then take a tile from that box. If you're collecting one of these known as a decree tile, then you must also spend 5 coins, as you're reminded of here, returning that money to the general supply. Now in a 2-player game, this box also contains what are known as the accounting tiles, but these don't cost any extra coins to take, and neither do any of the rest of the tiles in the game. Once you've collected your tile, add it to your personal hive so that at least one of its 4 yellow sides is touching a yellow side of other tiles you have in play. These lighter colored, thicker edges on the ends don't count. So for example, I could place this tile here like this because only yellow sides are touching, or maybe I would place it here, but I couldn't place it like this or perhaps like that. Now, once you've placed your tile, if it creates an empty single space completely surrounded by tiles, you've created an empty cell, which is good. Here's a new layout you might find later in the game just to show you that it's possible to place a single tile and create more than 1 empty cell at the same time. And as soon as any number of empty cells are created, you immediately stop and resolve every symbol that's adjacent to them. The symbols represent hive actions, and there are 6 different types, and we'll go over all of them in just a moment. And you can activate all of the actions adjacent to cells you just created in any order you like. You can even do the same action more than once if there's more than 1 copy showing in the adjacent spaces. But if an action is adjacent to more than 1 empty cell that was just made, you still only resolve that space once, not once for each empty cell. So in this case, I would get to resolve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 actions. So what are the various actions? Let's find out by starting with this symbol known as foraging. Here, you can move your forage token up to 1 space for free going up, down, left, or right, but never diagonally. And you can keep moving by paying an extra 2 coins per move. So I could spend 4 coins and then maybe go here and here. Now we'll see later how you can end up with empty spaces, but a forage token can move into or through empty spaces or spaces that contain other forage tokens. You can even move no spaces at all. So on a future turn, if I was still here, I could just stay there. But wherever you end up, you then either collect nectar or pollen. If the border of the token you ended your movement on matches the pattern surrounding one of your empty cells, you can collect it. The pattern of an empty cell are the orange and white lines surrounding it, and your reference tile will show you the 4 possible patterns necessary to collect the different types of nectar. For example, to gain wildflower, you need a pattern like this. And note the only thing that needs to match is the pattern. It doesn't matter the orientation. And as I mentioned, if you do have an empty cell matching the token you landed on, you then place it into that cell. That area of your hive will now be able to produce honey later, as we'll see. If you landed on an empty space or a token that doesn't match an empty cell in your hive, you instead gain a pollen, taking it from the supply and adding it to your board. And remember, the color of the pollen doesn't matter. Also, if the pollen supply ever runs out, just use a suitable replacement. So that covers foraging, and you're reminded of it and all the other types of hive actions here. So next, let's discuss producing. Here you set your fan token on any space of your hive, and each empty nectar tile adjacent to that space immediately produces one honey of its type, which you then add to it from the supply. If a spot already has honey, then it doesn't get another. At most, only one piece can be on top of each nectar tile. After any honey has been added by this action, you then take back your fan. This is the symbol for the accounting action, and to resolve this, you simply gain 5 coins from the supply. And if you ever run out of coins in the supply, just use a suitable replacement. This symbol represents the market action, which lets you either sell to market or complete an order. To complete an order, you pick any one of the face-up cards here and then spend the matching honey it shows from your nectar tiles. This one requires rosemary and cherry blossom, and I have a rosemary and a cherry blossom here, which I return to the supply. Then you collect the order and place it in front of yourself, where it will be worth this amount of points at the end of the game. After collecting the order, I also gain the action printed below the stack it came from. So in this case, I'd be able to perform the produce action. And I don't have to take it right at that moment, but I must take it at some point before the end of my turn if I'm able. Then, at the very end of my turn, not at the end of the action, but at the end of my turn, I flip the top card of that stack face up. Now, rather than completing an order with this action, I could have instead used it to sell to market. To do this, you pick either pollen or any one honey type, and then sell as much of that particular resource as you have or want to. And then, for each piece sold, you gain coins equal to where that matching token is in the market relative to this track, returning those pieces to the supply. So if I sold 2 cherry blossom honey, as shown here, I would get 6 coins for each, which is 12 coins total. Then after gaining your coins, no matter how many pieces you sold, you move the related marker of that resource down 1 space. Now, if a resource was already at the bottom when you go to sell it, you instead pick any other resource and drop its marker down by 1. Okay, next let's talk about the decree action, and this one is very simple. Activating it allows you to perform any one of the other 5 actions, even when you already performed this turn. And we've discussed all 5 of the other actions except for new bees, so let's wrap up with that one. To perform the new bee action, you take one of your bees from the general supply and add it to this area. Now, if you have no workers in the supply, then this action does nothing, and any bees here will stay there until your next recall workers action. Remember, on your turn, you either take a tile or recall workers. Now, to summarize taking a tile, you first place 1 or more bees into a hive box and then take a tile from there, adding it to your hive. And if that created an empty cell, you get to resolve all the adjacent actions to it. On the other hand, instead of taking a tile, you can choose to recall workers. And if you ever don't have enough workers to be able to take a tile, then you must recall. So let's see how recalling workers works. First, take all your bees from every hive box, including any new bees, and then put them back on your board, which will make them available for you to use on future turns. Then you may move your forage token up to 1 space for free, but you can't pay for any extra movement or take anything from the space that you move to. This extra move is really just to help you get closer to where you might want to be. And that's how a turn works. You either take a tile or recall workers, and then the next player in clockwise order goes. However, during a turn, you might also fulfill one of the Queen's contests. Every time you play, there will be 3 contests available here, and there are 2 types. Speed contests, which show this symbol, and final contests that have this symbol. Speed contest rewards are given out as soon as a player completes them. For example, the first player to collect 1 nectar of each type gains the first place reward of 20 coins, which they would then take from this card and add to their personal supply. In a 2-player game, there is no second place reward, but if we had 3 players, the second person to complete this would get 10 coins, and with 4 players, the third person gets 5. In this way, the last player never gets a reward, no matter the player count. Also, I should mention that if a contest relates to how many bees you have, you include any in the hive box, even new bees that you've gained but haven't recalled yet. Some contests will relate to having cells in a cluster, and a cluster is any group of 3 nectar or empty cells that are adjacent to a single space within your hive. If each of those cells contain nectar tiles, like this one does, then it's a nectar cluster. But if these had all been empty, then it would be called an empty cluster. And cells can also be part of more than one cluster at the same time. For example, this is a cluster here, but then these 2 cells are also helping to make this cluster on this side. Sometimes you'll have contests that ask for straight lines, and they'll refer to either empty cells or nectar cells. A straight line is one that, when drawn, cuts through the exact middle of a cell and keeps going. And to count, the line must alternate between a cell and a regular hive space. So this is a line of 3 nectar. This here is a line of 2 nectar. And then we have another line here of 2 empty cells, and this one also is 2 empty cells. Now, both of these are final contests, and these award you with their points at the end of the game, so we'll discuss how to score them then. Speaking of which, the game continues with players taking turns around and around the table until either 4 of the 5 resources in the market are at the bottoms of their tracks, or once all of the orders in 2 of the 3 stacks are gone. As soon as either of those situations has happened, you continue playing until everyone has had an equal number of turns, and then the game ends. And this means that the player seated to the right of the person holding the first player token will always take the last turn. And then it's time to calculate the final scores. First, total the value of all your coins and add 1 point for every honey and pollen in your hive. Then add to that the points shown on each of the orders that you completed. Then check to see if you scored any points from the final contests. For example, if you had the most orders fulfilled, then you would gain an additional 20 points. And like speed contests, the person in last place for a contest never receives any points. So in our 2-player game, yellow wouldn't score anything for this contest. If instead we'd had 3 players, then only first and second place would score, and the third place finisher wouldn't get anything. Now, if you have 2 players tied for a position, each of the tied players get the full points for that place, but then the next player's payout is bumped down by 1. So in a 3-player game, if we had a tie between blue and yellow for first place, they'd each get 20 points, and the next player would get nothing because the last place person never scores anything. But if there had been 4 players, again, yellow and blue would get 20 points, but green here would get bumped down 1 position and score only 5 points. Of course, the pink player here would get nothing. If 3 or more players tie for a given place, each of them gets the full payout for that position, but then no further payouts are awarded for that contest. Now, the player with the highest total score is declared the winner. If there's a tie in points, the tied player with the most remaining honey and pollen wins. If there's still a tie, the tied player with the most completed orders wins, and if there's still a tie, the tied players share the victory. The game also comes with an advanced variant where you use the other side of the woodland board, labeled as B, and then organize the nectar tokens face down, arranged by the images on their back, placing them into the matching spaces for them here. You'll also only keep a certain number of these like you do during the regular game, but you'll use this table instead. You'll no longer be foraging with your token. Instead, anytime you forage, you just pick any one face-down tile and secretly look at it. If it matches an empty space in your hive, then you add it there, but if not, you return it face down from where you took it. In this way, foraging has more of a memory element where you're trying to keep track of where the nectar is that you need so you can go back and claim it later. Again, the full rules for this you'll find here if you'd like to try that, and you'll also find rules for solo play on these 2 pages that I'll leave for you to discover on your own. But otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Honeybuzz. If you have any questions at all about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. But until next time, thanks for watching.